Why is it that some of the most talented people are the ones the world overlooks? Why do those with the deepest minds often go unheard, while the loudest voices dominate the room? If you've ever felt unseen despite your value, this message is for you. Today we're going to uncover 6 reasons why you're underestimated despite your talent, not as a flaw, but as a sign of your quiet strength. You see, we live in a culture that confuses noise with leadership and flash with depth. But there's a different kind of power, one that doesn't beg to be noticed because it was never meant to compete. It was meant to transform. You've been told your silence is weakness, that your calm is passivity. But the truth is, your invisibility isn't failure, it's preparation. Let this be the moment you stop shrinking and start owning what they could never measure. You don't shout your worth from rooftops. You don't interrupt to prove you belong. You let your work speak, and because it doesn't scream, they assume it has nothing to say. But real brilliance doesn't chase approval. It doesn't wear neon signs. It waits, builds, and deepens in silence. Cain reminds us the quietest people often have the loudest minds. But we weren't taught to listen for stillness. We were trained to chase spectacle. That's why they overlook you, not because you're lacking, but because you're not loud. Adler would say this comes from strength, not insecurity. You learn to rely on inner worth, not outside noise. But understand this: when you refuse to sell yourself just to be seen, you confuse the world. And in that confusion, they underestimate you. Don't change, because the same silence that makes them miss you will one day make them remember you forever. You were raised to be good, not grand. To listen first, to serve quietly, to never make others feel small, just to feel seen. So you lead with humility. And because of that, they confuse you with someone weak. But humility isn't the absence of strength, it's strength restrained. Adler taught that the feeling of inferiority, when transformed, becomes a deep source of will. You learned early how to keep peace, how to hold pain without shouting, how to work without needing reward. Not because you thought you were less, but because you believed others mattered too. The world sees humility and forgets to ask where it came from. But you know yours was forged in silence, not surrender. You've chosen grace where others choose ego, and they'll never understand how hard that is. Let them talk louder. You're not here to rise above them. You're here to rise beyond them, rooted, grounded, unshakable. You solve problems without panic. You move through complexity like it's instinct. And because you don't struggle out loud, they assume it's not real work. But what they see as natural talent is the result of years you spent in silence, refining, failing, adapting, learning. You've practiced clarity in chaos. You've trained yourself to stay steady where others shake. And now your presence brings solutions instead of storms. Adler called this the strength that grows from inner tension, the quiet effort to prove you belong not to the world but to yourself. You never made noise about your discipline, so they didn't notice. But the more you master, the more invisible your mastery becomes. That's why they underestimate you. They think ease means luck, but you've earned every effortless breath with 10,000 hard ones behind it. Excellence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just walks in, does the job, and leaves no trail but results. You don't raise your voice to be heard. You don't manipulate, intimidate, or perform dominance in the name of leadership. And because you reject their games, they assume you have no power. But what they miss is this: true power doesn't chase control, it radiates self-control. You don't move people by force, you move them by presence. Calm, grounded, unshaken. Adler understood that real strength isn't about overpowering others, it's about not needing to. You refuse to climb ladders built on ego. You choose integrity even when it costs visibility. And that unsettles people who rely on performance to feel significant. You walk into a room and reshape the energy without saying a word. You lead without demanding attention. And because your influence doesn't look like theirs, they underestimate it. But remember, this power that needs to prove itself is already weak. Yours doesn't shout, it shifts the atmosphere, and that's far more lasting. You don't chase urgency. You don't wear burnout as a badge. You remain still, focused, deliberate, and because of that, they think you don't want more. But ambition doesn't always come wrapped in chaos. Sometimes it breathes quietly through discipline. Your silence is strategy, not absence. You don't talk about every plan because you're too busy building it. Adler believed that what looks passive on the surface often masks deep psychological drive underneath. You're not slow, you're precise. You're not soft, you're centered. The world is loud about movement, but real power isn't measured by how fast you sprint, it's by how long you last. And your ability to wait to observe, to grow without rushing, is what sets you apart. They misread your calm because they confuse noise with progress. But you're not here to impress them in a moment. You're here to outlast their assumptions with a lifetime of unshakable purpose. You don't even speak, and yet the room shifts. You don't provoke, but your presence exposes what others are hiding. They feel it, the contrast. You don't chase approval, so they question their need for it. You don't compete, so they wonder why they crave dominance. And it unsettles them. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you remind them of what they're not ready to confront. Cain spoke of the quiet ones who carry truth like a mirror, and you are one of them. Your calm feels confrontational to the insecure. Your self-possession threatens those built on performance. They don't understand you, so they diminish you. But the discomfort you create isn't rejection, it's revelation. You weren't meant to fit into their comfort zone. You were meant to shift it, so let them squirm. Growth always begins with discomfort, and sometimes your mere existence is the awakening they never asked for, but desperately need. Let them misread your silence. Let them underestimate your stillness. You weren't born to entertain the shallow, you were made to disturb the deep. The world doesn't know how to value what doesn't shout, but that was never your concern. You've walked through fire without making it a show. You've carried storms and still move with grace. That's power. That's legacy. You are not behind, you are becoming. And when you finally rise, it won't be to prove them wrong. It will be to prove that quiet was always strength waiting for its moment. So keep building, keep trusting. Let this be your reminder they overlooked you because they couldn't define you. And when they can't define you, they can't contain you. If this spoke to something true and you share it, subscribe to stay connected, and never forget you don't need permission to shine. You were born to shift rooms even in silence.